Chapter 1, The Weight of Destiny in the Boundless Depths of Space. The starship Elysium cut through the darkness like a silent sentinel. It was the last hope for a galaxy teetering on the brink of annihilation, and at its helm stood Commander Zara Velkin. Her silver hair cascaded down her back, shimmering in the dim light of the bridge, her blue eyes hard as steel as they gazed out at the black void beyond. The Elysium was not just a ship, it was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for the scattered remnants of civilizations that had once thrived across the stars, but even a beacon can flicker. Zara's heart was heavy, burdened by the knowledge of the sacrifice that had been made to keep the Elysium moving. Karen, the last of the Zarthos, had given his life to slow the advance of the vortex, a cosmic anomaly that threatened to consume the entire galaxy. The memory of their final moments together haunted Zara. The kiss they had shared, filled with both love and despair, had been a farewell and a promise. It was a promise Zara knew she might never be able to fulfill, but it was one she would die trying to keep. The vortex, created eons ago by the precursors, was a force of unimaginable power. It was a black hole that devoured everything in its path, growing stronger with each passing moment. And now, despite Karen's sacrifice, it was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to unleash its fury upon the galaxy. Zara clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. She could not afford to wallow in grief. Not now. There was still so much to do, so many lives depending on her. The Elysium and its crew were all that stood between the vortex and the destruction of everything she had ever known. Commander Velkin, Lieutenant Merrick's voice broke through the silence, pulling Zara from her thoughts. His tone was professional, but she could sense the underlying concern. "We've received a transmission from Admiral Kalos. He's requesting an immediate status update." Zara took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Patch him through." The holographic display on the bridge flickered to life, and the stern visage of Admiral Kalos appeared. He was a grizzled veteran of countless interstellar wars, his face etched with the scars of battle. His eyes, though hardened by years of conflict, held a glint of respect as they met Zara's. "Commander Velkin," Kalos began, his voice a deep rumble that resonated through the bridge. "I understand that you've suffered a great loss, but we don't have the luxury of time. The vortex is still a threat, and we've just received reports of another anomaly on the far side of the galaxy." Zara's heart sank. Another anomaly? Could it be another weapon created by the precursors? The thought sent a chill down her spine. "What do you need us to do, Admiral?" Zara asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside her. "We need you to investigate," Kalos replied. "Our sensors have detected strange readings from the planet Erythra. It's a world that was once home to a powerful civilization, but it's been abandoned for centuries. We believe the anomaly may be connected to the precursors, and we need you to find out what it is and, if possible, neutralize it." Zara nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Erythra was a world shrouded in mystery, its surface covered in ruins that predated even the oldest known civilizations. If there was a precursor weapon hidden there, it could spell disaster for the entire galaxy. "We'll depart immediately," Zara said, her resolve hardening. "But Admiral, we need to be prepared for the worst. If this anomaly is anything like the vortex, we may not be able to contain it." Kalos's expression darkened. "I'm aware of the risks, Commander. But we have no choice. If we don't act now, the galaxy will be lost." Zara understood all too well. The burden of leadership was a heavy one, and Kalos was no stranger to its weight. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would do so again. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever. "Understood, Admiral. Elysium out." The holographic display flickered off, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts once more. She turned to face her crew, all of whom were watching her with a mixture of anticipation and concern. "Set a course for Erythra," Zara ordered, her voice firm. "We have a mission to complete." As the Elysium's engines roared to life, propelling the ship towards the distant planet. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. But whatever lay ahead, she would face it head-on, just as Karen would have wanted. The galaxy's last hope rested on her shoulders, and she would not let it fall. Chapter 2, The Descent into Darkness. The journey to Erythra was long and fraught with tension. The crew of the Elysium was on edge, their nerves frayed by the constant threat of the vortex and the unknown dangers that awaited them on the abandoned planet. Zara spent much of the journey in her quarters, poring over ancient texts and records in an attempt to learn more about the precursors and the mysteries of Erythra. But the information was sparse, and what little she found only served to deepen her unease. Erythra had once been a thriving world, its cities teeming with life and its people masters of technology that far surpassed anything known today. But then, seemingly overnight, the civilization had vanished, leaving behind only ruins and unanswered questions. Some believed that the precursors had intervened, erasing the Erythrans from existence. Others whispered of a cataclysmic event that had torn the planet apart, leaving it a desolate wasteland. Whatever the truth, Zara knew one thing for certain: Erythra was dangerous, and they would need to be prepared for anything. As the Elysium approached the planet, the tension on the bridge was palpable. The crew worked in silence, their eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the swirling clouds of Erythra's atmosphere came into view. The planet was a dark, foreboding place, its surface shrouded in storms and shadow. "Prepare for descent," Zara ordered, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "I want all systems on high alert. We don't know what's down there." The Elysium's thrusters flared as the ship began its descent into Erythra's atmosphere. The turbulence was intense, shaking the ship violently as it pushed through the thick clouds. Zara gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white as she fought to maintain control. "Steady," she muttered to herself, her eyes locked on the viewscreen. Just a little further, suddenly, the ship broke through the clouds, revealing the surface of Erythra below. It was a landscape of stark contrasts, with jagged mountains rising from vast plains of ash and dust. The ruins of ancient cities dotted the landscape, their once grand structures now crumbling and decayed. But what caught Zara's attention was the massive structure at the center of the largest city. It was a towering obelisk, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Even from this distance, Zara could feel the power emanating from it, a force that sent a shiver down her spine. "Take us in closer," Zara ordered, her eyes narrowing as she studied the obelisk. "I want a full scan of that structure." As the Elysium approached the city, the ship's sensors began to pick up strange readings. The energy levels coming from the obelisk were off the charts, far beyond anything Zara had ever seen before. And then, without warning, the ship's systems began to fail. "Commander, we're losing power." Merrick shouted, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to regain control of the ship. "The obelisk, it's interfering with our systems." Zara's heart raced as the Elysium began to lose altitude, plummeting towards the surface. "Divert all power to the thrusters," she ordered, her voice sharp. "We need to stabilize." But it was too late. The ship crashed into the city with a deafening roar, skidding across the ground and coming to a halt in a cloud of dust and debris. Zara was thrown from her chair, hitting the floor hard as the ship shuddered around her. For a moment, there was only silence. Zara lay on the floor, dazed and disoriented, her ears ringing from the impact. But then the sound of alarms filled the air, and she forced herself to her feet, her vision swimming. "Status report," she demanded, her voice hoarse as she staggered back to her chair. Merrick's voice came through the comms, strained but steady. "We've sustained heavy damage, Commander. Several systems are offline, and we've lost contact with engineering." Zara cursed under her breath, her mind racing. They were stranded on a hostile planet, their ship crippled and vulnerable. And whatever was inside that obelisk was far more powerful than they had anticipated. "Send out a distress signal," Zara ordered, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. "And get me a team of engineers down to the engine room. We need to get the Elysium back online." As the crew scrambled to carry out her orders, Zara's eyes were drawn back to the view screen. The obelisk loomed in the distance, its dark surface shimmering with an eerie light. Whatever secrets it held, Zara knew they had to uncover them. It was their only chance of survival, but as she stared at the obelisk, a sense of foreboding settled over her. This was no ordinary structure. It was a weapon, a remnant of a war that had been fought long before her time. And if they were not careful, it would destroy them all. Chapter 3, The Heart of the Obelisk. Zara wasted no time. The Elysium had crashed, but they were not defeated. The first priority was to secure the ship and assess the damage, but her mind kept drifting back to the obelisk. There was something about it, something ancient and powerful, that called to her in a way she couldn't explain. She had to know more. As the crew worked to stabilize the Elysium, Zara assembled a team to investigate the obelisk. It was a small group: Merrick, a seasoned soldier named Tarek, and Dr. Lyra, an expert in precursor artifacts. They were the best she had, and she would need every bit of their skill to navigate the dangers that awaited them. The journey to the obelisk was fraught with tension. The city was a maze of crumbling buildings and twisted metal, the remnants of a civilization that had been wiped out in an instant. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder as storms raged on the horizon. "Stay sharp," Zara warned as they approached the obelisk. "We don't know what we're dealing with." The structure towered over them, its dark surface gleaming in the dim light. Up close, Zara could see that the symbols etched into the stone were not just markings, they were moving, shifting in patterns that seemed to defy logic. It was as if the obelisk was alive, pulsating with a power that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "Commander, I'm picking up some strange readings," Dr. Lyra said, her voice tinged with awe as she scanned the obelisk with her instruments. "The energy levels here are off the charts. This is unlike anything I've ever seen." Zara nodded, her eyes never leaving the obelisk. "Can you make sense of it? What is it?" Dr. Lyra hesitated, her brow furrowing as she studied the data. "I'm not sure. But it seems to be some sort of conduit, a channel for immense amounts of energy. It's possible that it's connected to the vortex, or even controlling it." Zara's heart skipped a beat. If the obelisk was linked to the vortex, then it was even more dangerous than they had thought. They needed to find a way to shut it down before it unleashed its full power. "Let's move in closer," Zara said, motioning for the team to follow her. "We need to find an entrance." They circled the obelisk, searching for any sign of a doorway or access point. But the surface was smooth, seamless, with no visible openings. It was as if the obelisk had been carved from a single piece of stone, its secrets locked away from prying eyes. Just as Zara was beginning to lose hope, Tarek called out from the other side of the structure. "Commander, over here. I think I've found something." Zara and the others hurried to join him. Tarek was standing in front of a section of the obelisk that seemed different from the rest. The symbols here were glowing brighter, their movements more frantic. And in the center of the wall was a faint outline, barely visible, that looked like a door. "Good work, Tarek," Zara said, her pulse quickening. "Let's see if we can open it." Dr. Lyra stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she activated a device designed to interface with precursor technology. She held it up to the outline, and for a moment, nothing happened. But then, with a soft hum, the symbols on the wall began to glow brighter, and the outline of the door slowly expanded until it was large enough for them to enter. Zara exchanged a tense look with Merrick and Tarek. "Stay alert. We don't know what's on the other side." With that, she stepped through the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. The air inside the obelisk was thick, heavy with a sense of foreboding. The walls glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the floor as they moved deeper into the structure. The corridor they followed was narrow, twisting and turning in a way that disoriented Zara. It was as if the obelisk was alive, shifting around them, leading them somewhere they did not want to go. After what felt like an eternity, the corridor opened up into a vast chamber. The ceiling soared high above them, the walls lined with more of the strange, shifting symbols. And in the center of the chamber, suspended in midair by invisible forces, was a massive crystal, its surface glowing with a soft, pulsing light. Zara approached the crystal cautiously, her instinct screaming at her to be careful. There was something about this chamber, about the crystal, that felt wrong. As if they were not supposed to be here, not supposed to see this. "Commander, this is incredible," Dr. Lyra breathed, her eyes wide as she examined the crystal. This is a power source, a generator of some kind. If I'm reading this correctly, it could be what's powering the vortex." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Can we shut it down?" Dr. Lyra hesitated, her eyes darting between Zara and the crystal. I'm not sure. The energy levels here are immense. If we tamper with it, it could destabilize the entire structure. But if we don't, the vortex will continue to grow." Zara clenched her fists, her mind racing. They were out of time. The galaxy was counting on them, and she could not afford to fail. But the risks were enormous. One wrong move, and they could destroy everything. "Do it," Zara ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "We have no other choice." Dr. Lyra nodded, her face pale as she approached the crystal. She reached out with trembling hands, her fingers brushing the surface. The crystal pulsed in response, and for a moment, Zara feared they had made a terrible mistake, but then, slowly, the light began to dim. The symbols on the walls flickered, their movements slowing as the power drained from the crystal. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was working, but just as hope began to take root, the ground beneath them shuddered. The walls groaned, the floor cracked, and Zara realized with a sickening jolt that the entire structure was collapsing. "Run!" she shouted, turning on her heel and sprinting back the way they had come. The others followed, their footsteps echoing through the chamber as they raced to escape the collapsing obelisk. The corridor was a blur of movement and noise, the walls closing in around them as the structure crumbled. Zara's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pushed herself to go faster. They had to make it out. They had to survive, but just as they reached the entrance, the ground gave way beneath Zara's feet. She fell, the world spinning around her as darkness closed in. The last thing she saw was the faint light of the doorway, and then everything went black. Chapter 4, Into the Abyss. When Zara awoke, she was lying on a cold, hard surface. Her head throbbed, her body ached, and for a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. But then, as the fog in her mind cleared, the memories came rushing back, the obelisk, the crystal, the collapse. She pushed herself up, wincing at the pain that shot through her limbs. She was in a dark, narrow tunnel, the walls rough and jagged. The air was thick with dust, and she could hear the distant sound of shifting rocks and the groan of the obelisk settling. "Merrick? Tarek? Dr. Lyra?" Zara called out, her voice echoing off the walls. But there was no response, only silence. Panic gripped her as she realized she was alone, trapped in the bowels of the obelisk with no idea how to escape. She had to find the others. They had to get out of here. Zara forced herself to stand, her legs trembling as she took a step forward. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, and the darkness was oppressive. But she had no choice. She had to keep moving. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading Zara deeper into the obelisk. She had no sense of direction, no way of knowing if she was going the right way. All she could do was follow the path before her and hope it would lead her to safety. As she moved deeper into the tunnel, Zara began to notice strange markings on the walls. They were similar to the symbols she had seen in the chamber, but these were different, more primitive, more chaotic. It was as if the obelisk itself was breaking down, unraveling at the seams. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that the obelisk was not just a structure, it was a living entity, a creature of immense power and intelligence. And she was inside it. She quickened her pace, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pushed herself to go faster. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around her. She had to get out. She had to find a way out, but just as she was beginning to lose hope, she saw a faint light ahead. It was small, barely more than a pinprick, but it was there, a beacon in the darkness. Zara's heart leaped with hope, and she broke into a run, her footsteps echoing through the tunnel as she raced towards the light. The walls closed in around her, the tunnel narrowing to the point where she had to squeeze through, but she kept going, driven by the need to escape. Finally, she reached the light. It was coming from a small opening in the tunnel, just large enough for her to crawl through. Zara hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what was on the other side, but she had no choice. It was her only way out. Taking a deep breath, Zara lowered herself to the ground and crawled through the opening. The tunnel was tight, the walls pressing in on her from all sides, but she kept moving, her eyes fixed on the light ahead, and then, with a final push, she was through. Zara tumbled out of the tunnel and into a cavernous chamber, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. She lay on the ground for a moment, catching her breath, her body trembling with exhaustion, but as she looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The chamber was massive, far larger than the one she had seen before. The walls were lined with strange machinery, the likes of which Zara had never seen. And in the center of the chamber was a massive sphere, its surface covered in the same chaotic symbols she had seen in the tunnel, but what truly terrified Zara was what was inside the sphere. It was a creature, massive and grotesque, its body a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes. It pulsed with energy, its movements slow and deliberate as it floated inside the sphere. And as Zara watched, the creature turned one of its many eyes towards her, fixing her with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her very soul. Zara's heart raced as she scrambled to her feet, her mind screaming at her to run. But she was frozen, unable to move as the creature's gaze held her in place, and then, without warning, the creature let out a low, rumbling growl, the sound vibrating through the chamber. The machinery around it hummed to life, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter as the creature's energy pulsed through them. Zara knew she had to get out of there. She had to warn the others. But she couldn't move, couldn't tear her gaze away from the creature as it began to stir inside the sphere. The creature's growl grew louder, the air in the chamber vibrating with its power. Zara could feel the energy building, a force so immense it threatened to crush her where she stood, and then, with a deafening roar, the creature broke free from the sphere. Zara was thrown to the ground as the creature's energy exploded outward, the chamber shaking violently. The walls cracked and crumbled, the machinery sparking and smoking as the creature's power surged through it. Zara scrambled to her feet, her mind racing as she searched for a way out. But the chamber was collapsing around her, the walls closing in as the creature's energy tore it apart. She had to move, had to get out before it was too late. Zara turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest as she sprinted towards the tunnel she had come through. But just as she reached it, the ground gave way beneath her, and she was plunged into darkness. Chapter 5. The ruins of Erythra. Zara awoke to the sound of dripping water and the cold touch of stone beneath her. The air was damp and musty, and she could feel the weight of the earth pressing down on her from above. She was trapped, buried beneath the ruins of the obelisk. For a moment, panic gripped her, and she struggled to breathe. But then, slowly, she forced herself to calm down. She was alive, and as long as she was alive, there was hope. She took a deep breath and tried to move, but her body protested, pain shooting through her limbs with every attempt. She was pinned beneath a pile of rubble, her legs trapped beneath a heavy slab of stone. Gritting her teeth, Zara pushed against the stone with all her strength, her muscles straining with the effort. But it was no use. The stone was too heavy, and she was too weak. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. She was trapped, alone, and there was no one coming to save her. But then she thought of Karen, of the sacrifice he had made to save the galaxy. He had given his life for her, for all of them. She couldn't give up now. She had to keep fighting. With renewed determination, Zara reached for her comm unit, which had miraculously survived the collapse. She activated it, praying that someone would hear her. "This is Commander Velkin," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm trapped beneath the ruins of the obelisk. If anyone can hear me, I need assistance. Repeat, I need assistance. For a moment, there was only static. But then, to her immense relief, a voice crackled through the comms. Commander Velkin, this is Merrick. We're on our way to your location. Hold on. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They were coming. She just had to hold on a little longer. Time seemed to stretch on as she waited, the pain in her legs growing worse with each passing moment. But finally, she heard the sound of footsteps above her, and the rubble around her began to shift. Commander, we're here, Merrick's voice called out as the debris was slowly lifted away. We're going to get you out of here. Zara closed her eyes, relief washing over her as the weight was slowly lifted from her body. When the last piece of rubble was removed, she was finally able to breathe freely, though the pain in her legs was excruciating. With Merrick's help, Zara was carefully pulled from the rubble and lifted onto a makeshift stretcher. The pain was nearly unbearable, but she forced herself to stay conscious. There was still so much to do, so many questions that needed answering. As they carried her out of the ruins and back to the Elysium, Zara's mind raced with thoughts of the creature she had seen inside the obelisk. It was like nothing she had ever encountered before, and the memory of its gaze sent a shiver down her spine. What was it? And what connection did it have to the precursors? Back on the Elysium, Zara was rushed to the medical bay, where Dr. Lyra was waiting. The ship's systems had been partially restored, though the damage was extensive, and it would take time to get everything back online. As Dr. Lyra worked to stabilize her injuries, Zara relayed everything she had seen inside the obelisk: the creature, the sphere, the machinery. Lyra listened intently, her expression growing more concerned with every detail. Commander, this creature, it sounds like something from the precursor legends, Lyra said, her voice tense. They spoke of beings that existed outside of our reality, creatures of immense power that were sealed away by the precursors to protect the galaxy. If this is one of those beings, we could be in serious danger. Zara's heart sank. We need to find a way to stop it. If it gets loose, it could destroy us all. Lyra nodded, her expression grim. I'll begin analyzing the data we've collected. There may be something in the precursor records that can help us. But it's going to take time. Time. It was the one thing they didn't have. The creature was out there, and it was only a matter of time before it struck. As Zara lay in the medical bay, her mind racing with thoughts of the creature, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something catastrophic. The vortex, the obelisk, the creature, it was all connected, and the more they learned, the more dangerous their situation became. But she couldn't afford to give in to fear. The galaxy was counting on her, and she would not let them down. They would find a way to stop the creature, to seal the vortex, to protect the galaxy from the forces that threatened to consume it. They had to. Chapter 6. The final stand. Days passed in a blur of pain and anxiety as Zara recovered from her injuries. The Elysium's crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage to the ship, and Dr. Lyra spent every waking moment poring over the data they had collected from the obelisk. But despite their best efforts, the answers they sought remained elusive. The creature was a being of immense power, far beyond anything they had ever encountered. Its energy signature was unlike anything in the galaxy, and it seemed to defy the laws of physics as they knew them. It was a creature of chaos, a force of destruction that had been sealed away by the precursors for a reason, and now, it was free. Zara knew that they had no choice but to confront the creature. It was only a matter of time before it attacked, and they needed to be ready. But as the day of reckoning drew closer, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Lyra came to Zara with the results of her analysis. Commander, I believe I've found a way to stop the creature, Lyra said, her voice tinged with both hope and fear. The precursor records mention a weapon, a device capable of neutralizing the energy of beings like the one we encountered. But it's not on Erythra. It's located on a planet in a neighboring system, a world called Arion. Zara's heart leaped with hope. Can we get there in time? It will be close, Lyra admitted. But if we can retrieve the device, we may have a chance. Zara didn't hesitate. Set a course for Arion. We leave immediately. As the Elysium sped towards Arion, Zara couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They were racing against time, against a creature that could tear them apart with a single thought. But they had no choice. They had to succeed, or the galaxy would be lost. When they arrived at Arion, the planet was a barren wasteland, its surface scarred by ancient wars and natural disasters. But hidden deep beneath the surface was the device they sought, the key to defeating the creature and sealing the vortex. The journey to the device was treacherous, the tunnels beneath Arion fraught with dangers both natural and artificial. But Zara and her team pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Finally, after hours of searching, they found it, a massive structure, buried deep within the planet's core. The device was ancient, its surface covered in symbols and markings that glowed faintly in the dim light, but as they approached, Zara felt a sense of dread wash over her. The device was not alone. The creature was here, waiting for them, its presence a dark shadow that loomed over the chamber. Zara knew they were out of time. They had to activate the device before the creature could strike. Get the device online. Zara ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. We have to do this now. Dr. Lyra and the others worked frantically to activate the device, their fingers flying over the controls as the creature drew closer. The air crackled with energy, the symbols on the walls glowing brighter as the device hummed to life, but just as they were about to activate it, the creature struck. That it was like a force of nature, a whirlwind of energy and destruction that tore through the chamber, ripping the walls apart and sending debris flying in all directions. Zara was thrown to the ground, her vision swimming as the creature's power washed over her, but even as the creature unleashed its fury, Zara refused to give up. She forced herself to her feet, her body trembling with exhaustion, and reached for the controls of the device. With a final, desperate effort, she activated the device, sending a surge of energy through the chamber. The creature let out a deafening roar as the energy struck it, its body writhing in pain as the device began to drain its power, but the creature was not defeated. It lashed out, its tentacles whipping through the air as it tried to destroy the device. Zara knew she had only one chance. She had to overload the device, to push it beyond its limits and destroy the creature once and for all. Ignoring the pain in her body, Zara reached for the controls and began to increase the power output of the device. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, the air crackling with energy as the device surged to life. The creature screamed in agony as the energy overwhelmed it, its body disintegrating under the force of the device. But even as it died, it lashed out one final time, its tentacles wrapping around the device and pulling it down with it. Zara watched in horror as the device began to collapse, the chamber shaking violently as the ground beneath her gave way. She had done it. She had defeated the creature. But the cost was too high. As the chamber collapsed around her, Zara closed her eyes, accepting her fate. She had done everything she could. The galaxy was safe, and then, everything went black. Chapter 7, The Light of a New Dawn. When Zara opened her eyes, she was surrounded by light. It was soft, warm, and welcoming, a stark contrast to the darkness she had faced in the chamber. For a moment, she thought she was dead, that this was the afterlife, but then she realized she was still alive. The light was not the afterlife, it was the light of the Elysium, shining down on her as she lay in the ship's medical bay. She was alive. They had survived. As she sat up, pain lanced through her body, but she ignored it. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. Dr. Lyra was by her side, a look of relief on her face. Commander, you're awake. We thought we had lost you. Zara shook her head, her voice hoarse. What happened? You did it, Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. You defeated the creature. The device worked, but it was destroyed in the process. We were able to pull you out just in time. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It was over. The creature was gone, the vortex was sealed, and the galaxy was safe, but as she looked around the medical bay, she realized that the cost had been high. Many of her crew were injured, and the ship itself was barely holding together. They had won, but it had come at a great price. As Zara lay back down, exhaustion finally overtaking her, she couldn't help but think of Karen. He had sacrificed everything to save the galaxy, and in the end, they had succeeded. But at what cost? The Elysium had survived, but it would never be the same. The galaxy was safe, but it was forever changed. And Zara knew that her journey was far from over, but for now, she allowed herself to rest. The battle was won, and a new dawn was rising over the galaxy. A dawn of hope, of rebuilding, of healing, and as the light of the Elysium shone down on her, Zara knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the strength and determination that had brought her this far, because she was Commander Zara Velkin, and she would not be defeated. Epilogue: The legacy of the stars. The galaxy would remember the events of Erythra and the heroic efforts of the crew of the Elysium. Monuments would be built, stories would be told, and the memory of Karen, Zara, and all who fought alongside them would be enshrined in the annals of history. But for Zara, the greatest legacy was not the victory itself, but the knowledge that they had protected the future. The galaxy would continue to thrive, its people free to live their lives, to explore, to dream. As she stood on the bridge of the Elysium, gazing out at the stars, Zara felt a sense of peace. The darkness had passed, and a new era had begun. An era of hope, of unity, of light, and as the Elysium sailed into the unknown, Zara knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together because they were not just a crew, they were a family. And together, they would ensure that the light of the stars would never fade. The end.